Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naeshtiki Om Gyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham Karoti Vachanam Pangam Langyate Gire Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dina Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining. We'll resume with our discussion on the third canto, chapter 31, verse 41. And this comes in the section of Lord Kapila describing the effects of association, specifically improper association. So we'll read verse 41. Yamanyate patin mohan manmayam rishabhayayatim strivam stri sangato prapto vitaptaya graha pradam. A living entity who, as a result of attachment to woman in his previous life, has been endowed with the form of a woman, foolishly looks upon Maya in the form of a man, her husband as the bestower of wealth, progeny, house, and material assets. So, in the previous verses, Lord Kapila had cautioned against the association with women. And so much so that he even cautioned against associating with those men who associate with women. He says it's so insidious. Now here he says that it's not just women, but the opposite is also true. The association of men who are worldly minded is a problem for women who are wanting to progress on the path of bhakti and jnana. So he explained this in two verses. So in this verse he says that a man receives a woman's body because of excessive attraction to women in the previous life. And because of that excessive attraction, the men tend to think of women in the previous life, and thus they get a body of a woman. Now, having gotten a body of woman, the woman gets attracted to a man because she gets the shelter of wealth and progeny and house and protection. Men, on the other hand, they mostly are attracted to women because of sexual lust. But in either case, the attraction is the cause of the fall down. So Prabhupada says that this relationship between men and women is very complicated. But the substance is that one who aspires to ascend to the transcendental stage of spiritual realization should be very careful in accepting the association of a woman and vice versa. Then Prabhupada makes this interesting statement that in the stage of Krishna consciousness, however, such restriction of association may be slackened, because if a man and woman's attachment is not to each other but to Krishna, then both of them are equally eligible to get out of the material entanglement and reach the abode of Krishna. So Prabhupada is making this point that essentially the problem is not being attracted to the spirit soul, but the problem is being attracted to the material conception of the soul. And when the devotees are aspiring to transcend that conception, then just like the snake is without any poison, that association is now not that insidious. And Prabhupada confirms this. He says that this is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, that anyone who seriously takes to Krishna consciousness, whether in the lowest species of life or a woman or the less intelligent class, the mercantile or labor class, will go back home. So this is Prabhupada quoting from chapter 9, verse 32. Mami partha vipashritya yepisyupapa yonayaha striyo vaishyas tatha shudras tepi yanti param gatim. Krishna says that striyo vaishyas tatha shudras, that whether it's a woman, a vaishya, a shudra, papa yoniya, whether the person is in a lower class, tepi yanti param gatim, that they will get the supreme destination. So Prabhupada quotes this verse to make the point that the body per se is not a restriction or a limitation in the journey back to Godhead. So those who are aspiring transcendentalists are not very much bothered by the bodily conception. Now, amongst devotees, again, there is the understanding that some amount of separation needs to be there. And that is because even as devotees, there are mixed modes. Even a person is trying to be a devotee, they may still have residual attraction. So in order to prevent situations where those attractions again flare up, some kind of separation is recommended, but it is not really. The point Prabhupada makes is important, that it's not because a woman's body is any less suitable to make spiritual advancement, and vice versa, or a man's body is any less suitable. They are both equally potent in making spiritual advancements. Okay, verse 42. Tamatmano vijaniya patyapatya grahatmakam daivopasaditam mrityum mrigyorgayanam yatha. A woman therefore should consider her husband, her house, and her children to be the arrangement of the external energy of the Lord for her death, just as the sweet singing of the hunter is death for the deer. So very similar injunction is given to women. Previously, Lord Kapila was saying that men should be careful to avoid association of women. Now he says that women should be cautious about their attachment to men. And actually everything that has been said from the perspective of men is also applicable for women and vice versa. So the point he's making is that gender is inconsequential. The mechanics of the attraction may be different. A man may be attracted to women because of her beauty, and a woman may be attracted to the man because of his protection. But the root problem is that the attraction to the bodily concept is detrimental to spiritual advancement. So Prabhupada writes that Kapila Dev explains that not only is the woman the gateway to hell for man, the man is also the gateway to hell for woman. It is a question of attachment. And in the previous purport, he had said that devotees can slacken, and in this purport, he explains why. So he quotes the famous verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yathartham Upayunjata Nirvanda Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagyam Uchyate. So this is the Yukta Vairagya verse, which says that anything and everything can be used in the service of Krishna, including one's material body, including one's family, including one's household. So, because the devotee has that view, they are not very much disturbed by the bodily conception, because they look at the body and see how best they can serve Krishna. And similarly, they look at the body of others and see how best can those be engaged in the service of Krishna. So in the temple, we see that male-bodied devotees, they render certain kind of service. Female-bodied devotees, they render certain kind of services. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a gender-based distinction being done. It just means that that particular soul is using whatever Krishna has given them best in the service of the Lord and the devotees. Next verse, 43. Dehena jiva bhutena loka lokamanu vrajan bhunjane eva karmani karotya veratam puman. Due to his particular type of body, the materialistic living entity wanders from one planet to another, following fruitive activities. In this way, he involves himself in fruitive activities and enjoys the results incessantly. So, in 6 verses, from 43 to 48, Lord Kapila will now talk about another aspect of material existence, which is the cycle of birth and death. And in 3 verses, 44, 45, 46, we'll first try and define what birth and death is. We'll see a lot of overlap with Bhagavad Gita. Same concepts, and obviously with the same explanations are given. So previously, Lord Kapila said that the consequences of material attraction are repeated birth and death of the jiva. Now he will explain what exactly is this repeated birth and death. So one may question that if the jiva performs pious and sinful activities in a particular body, then why does some other body have to suffer the consequences? So for instance, in this particular body, I perform a lot of austerities. But then the benefits of that austerity are not enjoyed by this body. They're enjoyed by some other body. Similarly, someone performs a lot of sinful activities in this body. And then, for all practical purposes, the person, he has no culpability. So he performs sinful activities and he dies without any suffering. So Lord Kapila is answering this question in this verse. So the point he's making is that the gross body is not capable of enjoying or suffering. It's jada. It's matter. We know, right? It's earth, water, fire, air, ether. It's not capable of enjoying or suffering. So the enjoyment and the suffering are experienced by the subtle body. And it's the same subtle body that carries from one birth to another. Which is why the law of karma is justified, because the same body with which pious and sinful activities were performed is now suffering the consequence of those actions. So this is also one of the bases of there was a king in the ancient time called Trishanku, and when it came time for him to give up his body, then he went around complaining that why should some other body enjoy all the charity that I've given, I should enjoy in my own body. And different sages tried to explain to him based on tattva, but he did not. And then, of course, there is a pastime that happens that he goes to Vashishta, and Vashishta says no. So then he goes to Vishwamitra, and Vishwamitra, because he was inimical to Vashishta, he said, well, if Vashishta said no, I'll make it happen. So he actually sends Trishanku in the very same body to Indralok. And Indra, of course, throws him down. So, and Vishwamitra pushes him up. So he's kind of stuck in between. And Vishwamitra is so angry at Indra that he actually creates another heaven just for Trishanku. So the point that is made is that the change in the gross body is not an indication of the lack of culpability of one's action. So we can witness that in even this life, right? If we are younger, and so there are people who, when they are younger, they indulge in a lot of bad habits. Maybe they smoke a lot, maybe they drink alcohol, and because the body is young, they are able to tolerate that. And then later on, when the body is old, then they have to suffer the consequences of it. Right? So the body has changed from young to old, but the suffering is experienced by the same subtle body. Okay. Verse 44. Jivaya sayanu godeho bhutendriya manomaya tan nirodsya maranam avirbhavastu sambhavaha. In this way, the living entity gets a subtle body with a material mind and senses according to his fruitive activities. When the reaction of a particular activity comes to an end, that end is called death. And when a particular type of reaction begins, that beginning is called birth. So previous verses, Lord Kapila defined what is reincarnation, transmigration of the soul from one body to another. In this, he defines the two events that kind of bookend, bracket transmigration, which is birth and death. So getting a suitable body is birth, and leaving that body is death. So death is the separation of the gross body from the subtle body and the spirit self. And the birth is the recombination of another gross body with the spirit soul and the subtle self. So then one may ask that what will determine the nature of the new gross body? So Lord Kapila says that it is according to the fruitive activities, according to karma. Actually, it is a combination of desire and karma. So based on the karma, they get eligibility, and based on the desires, they get a specific body. And this has been going on since time immemorial. Now, the period between death and birth, when there is no gross body and only the subtle body exists is compared to deep sleep. So in this state, the soul acts through desires. So the activities are not performed because the gross body is not there, but the desires are still nurtured. And as soon as the gross body is made available, the desires will remanifest themselves as activities. So again, this is the concept explained in Bhagavad Gita, and specifically in 15.8, where Krishna says that the living entity in the material world carries different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus it takes one kind of body and quits another. Prabhupada says it is clear that a particular body is given to the living entity for a particular type of activity. This process is going on perpetually from a time which is impossible to trace out. Vaishnava poet therefore says anadi karma phale, which means that these actions and reactions of one's activity cannot be traced. For they may even continue from the last millennium of Brahma's birth to next millennium. So here Prabhupada is using millennium as kalpa. So he's saying it is that vast, because at the end of a kalpa, the jiva loses both the gross and the subtle body. But Prabhupada says that even then, these desires continue. And then he gives the example of Narad Muni. So Narad Muni, we see that he talks about his life in 4 kalpas. That he first appeared as the son of Brahma, but not very interested in following Brahma's instruction. So Brahma cursed him to become a Gandharva. So then he appeared in the next day of Brahma as a Gandharva. And there he was too materially attached. So then he was cursed by Daksha to take birth as the son of a maidservant, 3rd kalpa. And then by the association of the Bhakti Vedantas, he acquires the position of Narad, 4th kalpa. So in this way, this activities that are accruing in terms of karma and desires, they last across the end of the day of Brahma, and even the end of the life of Brahma. Even when Brahma dies, then these activities are preserved and remanifested. Verse 45, 46. Dravyopalabdhistanasya dravyekshayo gayata yada tat panchatvam ahamana utpatir dravyadarshanam yathakshno dravya vyavya darshana yogyata yada tadeva chakshushudrashtur drashtritva yogyatanyaho. When the eyes lose their power to see color or form due to morbid affliction of the optic nerve, the sense of sight becomes deadened. The living entity, who is the seer of both the eyes and the sight, loses his power of vision. In the same way, when the physical body, the place where the perception of the object occurs, is rendered incapable of perceiving, that is known as death. When one begins to view the physical body as one's very self, that is called birth. So, Jiva here is referring to not just the soul, but the soul and the subtle body. So we have to just understand it in that context. And Lord Kapila is once again explaining the characteristics of birth and death. that the separation of the jiva from the gross body, so the jiva is the soul and the subtle body, is death, and the recombination is birth. Now, what birth is also characterized by the identifying of the particular gross body as self. So that is another characteristic of birth. Lord Kapila gives the analogy of the eye here to give a slightly philosophical understanding of this process of transmigration. So he says that, like, when the eye cannot see, then it should be considered like the death of the eye, because the function of the eye is to see, and if the eye cannot see, then the eye has died. So it is like the death of the eye. Now, if there is a person whose eye has died, then the person will not get too much disturbed, because the person says that, well, I'm still there and I have another eye, and I have so much other things going on. So it's a little problematic, but it's fine, nothing to worry about. And if the person got a new eye in which he could see better, then he would actually be very happy. That my previous eye was problematic, I could barely see, now I have this new eye that I can see clear, so he would be happy. So Lord Kapila is making this, giving this analogy to say, to show that the removal of an organ is not a cause of lamentation. On the other hand, getting the renewed organ is a cause of jubilation. Now, the gross body is essentially a combination of organs. So just like when the eye gets removed, a person does not get bewildered, then extrapolating that, when the whole gross body is removed, the person should not get bewildered. On the other hand, the person should be happy because he gets another gross body which is newer and better functioning. So it should enliven. So the point that is being made is that this transmigration should not be a cause of bewilderment, because the jiva is dealing with it on a daily basis. And every day, the body is renewed to some extent. So the jiva gets up with a particular body and goes to sleep with another body. Right? So this is the ongoing process of transmigration. Death is simply a more distinct state. So just like the jiva is not getting bewildered earlier on, there is no reason for him to get bewildered later on. Vishwanath Chakravarti makes a slightly, technical point here. And he says that this transmigration from one gross body to another does not happen in other planets. It only happens on the earthly planet. Okay. Let's do verse 47. So we have a few more verses and we'll finish the chapter, and then we can pause for discussion. Tasman karya santraso na karpanyam na sambramaha buddva jiva gatim dhiro mukta sangas charediha. Therefore, one should not view death with horror, nor have the recourse to defining the body as soul, nor give way to exaggeration in enjoying the bodily necessities of life. realizing the true nature of the living entity, one should move about in the world free from attachment and steadfast in purpose. So the verse starts with tasmat. Tasmat means the conclusion, therefore, is. So this is Lord Kapila now concluding this set of instructions. So what is the conclusion he gives? That actually there is no birth and death. There is just an ongoing process of deterioration and renewal. Because this is ongoing, one should not be perturbed by that. And the reason Lord Kapila is making this point, because when the jiva is under extreme emotion, then one cannot perform his duty. So if the jiva is too much obsessed by death or by fear of death, then it will be difficult to perform other activities. So actually, of the 5 kinds of ignorances, one of the kind of ignorance is abhinivesh. Right? Abhinivesh is fear of death. And because of abhinivesh, the jiva is constantly in mental turmoil. In the Nectar of Devotion, Rupa Goswami, he states that there are 64 angas of bhakti. And then of the 64 angas, he says the first 20 and the last 5 angas are what he calls as the foundation to bhakti, which he says are mandatory. One of these 25 angas is Shokadi Avash Vartita Yatha. Shokadi Avash Vartita Yatha means that one should not be under the spell of lamentation in loss or jubilation in gain. Because both of these extreme emotions are not conducive to bhakti. So one should not be extremely happy if there is a birth in the family, and not be extremely despondent if there is a death or the person himself is seeing imminent death. Now, we do see that there are slightly contradictory instructions, because as you know, in the 13th chapter, Krishna says that one of the components of Gyan is Janma Mrityu Jaravadi Dukha Dosh Anudarshanam. So he says that one should be always aware of this dukkha of Janma Mrityu Jaravyadi, birth, death, disease, old age. Right? So there it is that you should always be conscious that this birth, death, disease, old age is a source of misery. Now here it is being said that don't consider birth and death as the source of misery. So the way that we reconcile these and understand it is that there is a difference between seeing something for what it is and being bewildered by it. So in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjun, he saw that his son Abhimanyu was killed and there was lamentation, but he was not bewildered by it. He continued with his duty as a warrior, and even as a father. He continued with his duty. So when it is said that one should be aware of the misery of birth, death, disease, old age, that is a factual assertion of the miseries in the material life. And when Lord Kapila is saying that nothing to be worried about birth and death, the point is making is do not get bewildered by it. So one should understand things for what they are, but not become consumed by it. So Srila Prabhupada says that a sane man should understand the miserable condition of this material body without being unnecessarily upset. He should try to find out if there is a remedy. The remedial measures can be understood when one associates with persons who are liberated. It should be understood, it must be understood who is actually liberated. The liberated person is described in Bhagavad Gita as one who engages in uninterrupted devotional service. So this is Prabhupada quoting in the Bhagavad Gita verse 1426, Mam Chayava Vicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate Sagunan Samityatan Brahma Bhuyayate Kalpate. And understanding that birth and death is simply a change at one's gross body does not also make a person stoic, right? Because Krishna expects you to experience grief. Like when in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjun said that this is my guru and my grandfather and my friends and relatives, and Krishna says Tam Titikshatva Bharata, that you must learn to tolerate, which means that he is expecting him to feel grief, right? So that he is not expecting him to simply be stoic or be incapable of any empathy. So he's saying it is fine to feel grief, but tam stikshasva bharata. But one must learn to tolerate it. One must not get bewildered by it. Okay, this is the last verse of the chapter 48. Samyak darshanaya buddhaya yoga vairagya yuktaya maya virachite loke charenyasya kalevaram. Endowed with right vision and strengthened by devotional service and a pessimistic attitude towards material identity, one should relegate his body to this illusory world through this reason. Thus, one can be unconcerned with the material world. So this is the conclusion, that one should move around the world made of Maya while giving up the attachment to the body and by utilizing the correct vision. So this is essentially the two principles of spiritual advancement, that is material detachment and spiritual attachment. So he says, endowed with right vision and strengthened by devotional service. So what is this? This is spiritual attachment. And then he said, a pessimistic attitude towards material identity. This is material detachment. One should relegate his body to this illusory world through this reason. So when one has this push and pull, then the body becomes a product of the material world. And the result of it is that the person becomes unconcerned, which means that he is no longer troubled by the material pushings. Prabhupada says that it is sometimes misunderstood that if one has to associate with persons engaged in devotional service, he will not be able to solve the economic problem. To answer the argument, it is described here that one has to associate with liberated persons, not directly, physically, but by understanding through philosophy and logic the problems of life. It is stated that samyak darshanaya buddhaya. One has to see perfectly. And by intelligence and yogic practice, one has to renounce this world. This renunciation can be achieved by the process recommended in the second chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is the chapter Divinity and Divine Service, which essentially talks about Yukta Vairagya. So Prabhupada also brings home a practical point through this verse. When Lord Kapila is saying that you can move around unconcerned within this material world, Lord Kapila is not saying that you reject the material world. So Prabhupada is building on that, saying that one who takes to the process of devotion can very much be a part of the material world. The person may have a family, a job, may have all kinds of material responsibilities, but the person will be unconcerned because of this vision that he has. The second point Prabhupada makes is that this vision develops through Vaishnava Sangha. And he said the Vaishnava Sangha is really through Vani as opposed to Vapu. That some person might say that for me to make spiritual advancements, I need to give up my home, go to the kutir of my Guru Maharaj and live there all by myself alone. And Prabhupada said that's not needed. And the 2 points are made over here. One is that the real association is by instructions. Even if the Guru is living in a kutir in the middle of a jungle, if a disciple is sincere in following instructions, there's no need for him to live in the kutir. He can live in the middle of the society, and not only live in the middle of the society, but be fully materially vested, and still can make advancements because of this vision of material detachment and spiritual attachment. So in this last section, Lord Kapila, he talks about the potency of association and warns against bad association. So the wrong kind of association for the belly and genitals would result in suffering and hellish conditions. And then Lord Kapila says wrong association is that which is violent or sinful or that is material on the bodily platform, or with men who are sexually engrossed. Of all these kinds of bad association with the opposite sex is considered to be the most unfavorable. Lord Kapila says it is so strong that very few in the creation of Narayana are immune to it. Therefore, one must be careful about it. And then Lord Kapila talked about the result of this association, that one gets caught in this cycle of birth and death. But by understanding the nature of death and the nature of birth after that, one can cease to be bewildered by it, but actually use it to make spiritual advancements. Okay, so this ends the 31st chapter of the 3rd canto. We have 2 more chapters left for the canto to finish. I'll pause here and see if there's any discussion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have a question regarding the karma, the law of karma. Some reactions are postponed for future life, not this life. We don't experience of the reactions now. I don't know whether anywhere it stays in the scripture, and I was thinking, please confirm or clarify. I was thinking that it is because these reactions are postponed because we don't have the suitable body or suitable environment to experience in this very life. So that is why it is postponed. Is that a right understanding, or why should it be otherwise postponed like that? Is there any scriptural?
I haven't read any. The first part of the statement you made is, of course, correct. That some karmic reactions are experienced sooner than later. Some can be experienced almost immediately, and some may be experienced after several lifetimes. But I haven't read anywhere that what is the reason for it, other than the fact that the law of karma is difficult to understand. but I haven't read that it's because of a lack of suitable body or like I said, or any other factor that I'm aware of. Because at any moment you're experiencing the results of karma that have fructified over several different lifetimes. Part of it from this lifetime, part of it from a lifetime a million years ago. Each karma is fructifying according to its own nature. And when they at every moment, the karmas that are fructified at that moment, they put you in a certain situation. So the understanding is, yes, that different karmas fructify over different periods of time. What determines it, that's not, at least not in the books Prabhupada is written and explained to us. It's not elaborated there.
For example, if somebody who kills a cow comes back as a cow to be killed, so obviously that cannot happen in this life. It has to happen in the next life. So I was coming with that kind of a logic. So I don't know whether that makes sense.
Yes. I mean, I see where you're going, but it's one particular point. Us considering that karma in isolation makes sense. But actually, when a person kills a cow, that's not the only karma that the person has performed. Maybe he gave a cow in charity in a previous lifetime. Maybe he did something else. So when you look at so many activities the person has performed, then it becomes a little difficult to establish this very linear cause and effect in terms of the person gets this body because of this karma, and that's why it's postponed to the next life. Especially like the example that you're giving, that when a person kills a cow, first they fall to hellish conditions. There they suffer. And then they take birth in the lower species. There they suffer. Then they take birth, as many hairs that were there on the body of the cow, they take birth as cow in that many lifetimes. And they are slaughtered in each of that lifetime. So it's almost like, one karma resulting in so many reactions. And then there are so many karmas that are also producing so many reactions. So, which is why Sukadeva Goswami says that difficult to understand the mechanics of karma.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, just a point of clarification. You mentioned that the gross body is not capable of enjoying or suffering. And on the other hand, you explained that enjoyment and suffering is tasted, or you could say, you can use the word enjoy again by only the subtle body. It's a little difficult to understand that. For example, I'm thinking the senses are, part of the gross body. If I eat ice cream, sure, it sounds, it appears like I'm enjoying with this gross body through the senses. It's like difficult for me to understand. The subtle body comprised of the mind, intelligence, and ego. Where does that come into play? According to this explanation, I mean, it's maybe you have an explanation, a little more, to for us to understand that.
So I hear what you're saying, because from an experiential perspective, it's a little difficult for us to make that distinction. From a philosophical perspective, it's a little easier, because the point is made that the gross body is made of matter, and matter is not sentient. So not possible for gross matter to experience happiness or pleasure or displeasure. when the soul leaves the body, then the same body can basically be put in ice or burnt, and nobody gets perturbed that this is causing so much of pain to the body or the body is enjoying. The reason they say is when the body is occupied by the material body is occupied by the soul and the subtle body. So then philosophically we can see that by the presence of it, one is able to experience, and by the absence of it, that whole experience goes away. So that means the experience can only be accrued to the subtle body. The gross body acts as a via media, that it's able to interact with the elements around. It's able to capture various information, but other than that, it's not really able to do anything else. It's the senses that actually categorize this. It's the mind that basically comes up with the paradigm that this comes in good, this comes in bad, and then it's the intelligence that basically accepts and rejects. So all these are basically functions of the subtle body.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
I was also thinking of the experiment. I think Sadaputa Prabhu was giving that explanation that if you construct a camera which can capture the sunrise and sunset, the camera can say this is now crimson red color and things like that. It can capture, but it can never capture the feeling. So therefore, the gross matter cannot really enjoy the sunset. It can only capture the information, not the feelings. So that's something that I was thinking.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts? Okay, if not, then I'll complete the 31st chapter with a quick recap. The 31st chapter is the instructions by Lord Kapila on the movements of the living entities. And it began with the jiva's growth and suffering in the womb. The initial verses in the chapter talked about how the jiva suffers in the womb. And then there is this set of 10 verses, which is the prayers of the jiva in the womb. So prayers of a particular devotee who happened to take birth again in the womb. And essentially the prayer is an assertion of the position of Krishna, position of the jiva, and a commitment that I will reestablish my lost position with you. So the jiva at one point asks to be taken out, but then he says, don't take me out. Because outside there is Maya, inside there is Maya, but at least I'm by myself. So the difference between the outside and the inside is association. That outside there is bad association, inside there is no association. But with the help of my mind and my intelligence, I will deliver you. So please keep me within the womb. So Lord Kapila then, he talks about association in the next set of verses, specifically the effect of bad association, and more specifically, association with the opposite sex, and how one should be careful about it. And then the chapter is concluded by Lord Kapila explaining the consequence of bad association, which is the samsara. Samsara is the cycle of birth and death. The consequence of bad association is that the person will die, and after death will take birth again and then die again. So he ends with a plea, a recommendation, an instruction that one should develop devotion and detachment. And by this devotion and detachment, one will develop the right vision that will help them extricate from this cycle. Okay, so that ends 31st chapter. We can now start on the 32nd chapter. So the 32nd chapter is entitled Entanglement in Fruitive Activities. And in this chapter, Lord Kapila, he essentially talks about, as the title says, fruitive activities. He essentially talks about karma. He talks about two kinds of karma. He will talk about sakam karma and nishkam karma. And then we'll see that just like in the last chapter, many of the tattvas that we studied in Bhagavad Gita are repeated. And same thing here, because Bhagavad Gita speaks about karma, sakam and nishkam. We will see that many of those tattvas are repeated and we can correlate them. Then Lord Kapila also in this chapter will criticize the non-devotees. And previously he had explained, in the previous chapter, he explained the results of sinful activities, which is falling into the hellish planets and lower species of life. Now he'll talk about the opposite, which is the result of pious activities. So by sinful activity, one falls. By pious activities, one gets elevated. So the verse has 43. The chapter has 43 verses. And the beginning chapter talks about sakam and nishkam karma. The bulk of the chapter actually talks about the different goals based upon different conceptions. What is the destination of sakam karma? What is the destination of nishkam karma? What is the destination of the impersonalists? What is the destination of the devotees? What is the destination of the jnanis? What is the destination of other paths? And the chapter will be concluded by Lord Kapila saying that all the other paths, if somehow or else they lead to bhakti, they will help in the realization of Bhagavan or Krishna. The point that he makes is that the most superior path is bhakti, and in themselves all the other paths are useless unless they lead one to bhakti. Okay, so we'll start with the first verse. Third canto, chapter 32, verse 1. Kapilo vacha athayogra medhiyan dharmaneva vasangrahe kamam artham cha dharman swam dogdi bhuya pipartitam. The personality of Godhead said, the person who lives in the center of the household life derives material benefits by performing religious rituals, and thereby he fulfills his desire for economic development and sense gratification. Again and again, he acts the same way. So in 4 verses, 1 to 4, Lord Kapila will describe the sakam karmi. So this verse is talking about the Grahamedi, which is the engrossed householder. So Lord Kapila, he compares him to Dugdi. So Dugdi actually literally means milk cow. So Dugdi means that the mood of a person with a milk cow is that the person will take the cow out to graze. And when the cow has grazed sufficiently, then the person will milk the cow and enjoy the milk. So this is the mood of the Sakam Karmi, that they will perform pious activities. And when they have sufficient pious activities, then they will enjoy the results of it. So the results is like the milk of the cow. So essentially they enjoy, Lord Kapila says, three things only: dharma, kam, and artha. No moksha. They're not interested in any kind of liberation. They're basically interested in being pious, being economically well off, and their senses being gratified. And then this process, because the person is not interested in moksha, so Lord Kapila says again and again, he says, bhuya piparti, that again and again this goes on. Because there is no escaping the cycle of karma. The person has no interest in moksha. So this kind of person is described in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 9 in verses 20 and 21. In verse 20 is described as those who study the Vedas and they drink the Soma juice, they go to the heavenly planets, and then they take birth amongst in the planet of Indra, where they enjoy delights. And then the next verse says that when the punya becomes ksheen, when the results of the pious activities are exhausted, they fall down again, and thus they only achieve repeated birth and death. Same point, Prabhupada says in the purport, it is said by Prahlad Maharaj, Puna Punas Charvita Charvarnam. So Charvita Charvarnam is chewing the chewed. So this is essentially doing the same thing over and over again. Perform karma, get some result, enjoy or suffer. Again perform karma, again get some result. Again enjoy or suffer. So Prahlad Maharaj actually says this in the 7th canto, 5th chapter. Punas Charvita Charvarna. And there he says that this happens because such persons have uncontrolled senses. Because they're too addicted to materialistic life, so they make progress towards hellish conditions and repeatedly chew that which has already been chewed. Their inclination towards Krishna are never aroused either by instruction of others or by their own efforts or by a combination of both. Okay, let's go to the second verse. Sachapi bhagavad dharma kamamud paran mukha yachate kratubhir deva pitramscha shadayanvitaha. Such persons are ever bereft of devotional service due to being too attached to sense gratification. And therefore, although they perform various kinds of sacrifices and take great vows to satisfy the demigods and forefathers, they are not interested in Krishna consciousness, devotional service. So the nature of this person is described that they perform activities according to the scriptures. Remember, these are pious activities, sakam karma. They are not vikarmis. So they're performing activities according to the scriptures, but the person is still being criticized because he rejects the worship of the Lord in favor of worshipping the demigods and the pitras. So again, Same point made in Bhagavad Gita over and over again, chapter 7, chapter 9. In 17th chapter, Krishna says that men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods. Those in the mode of passion worship the demons. And those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. So here Krishna is talking about the notion of Swabhavaja. So Swabhavaja is worship according to one's nature. So even though the person is following the scripture, the person is condemned because the person is not following the spirit of the scripture. Essentially, Swabhavaja means that the person follows according to his inclination. It's like I give somebody a book for exercise. And the book says, do exercise 1, exercise 2, exercise 3, exercise 4. The person goes and he says, I'll do exercise 1, and then I will do 3, and then I will maybe do 7. So the person is following the book. He's doing the exercises only as per the books. But he's still not considered to be following the book because he's cherry picking. Subhavaja. He says, I like this exercise, I'll do it. This one I don't, this one I do, and I will do this. So that is why such persons are criticized and condemned, because they're following the scriptures, but according to their own intrinsic nature. There's a difference between surrendering to the scripture and following the scripture. Surrendering means that you surrender to the spirit of the scripture. And following means that you mechanically follow the do's and don'ts. So because of the potency of the scripture, even mechanically following it gives piety. But unless one surrenders to the scripture, there is no real lasting benefit out of it. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he actually equates demigod worship to impersonalism. So he says polytheism is actually impersonalism, because when one says that the absolute truth has no form and personality, then one gets a license to imagine and impinge any form on the Lord. So Prabhupada said in Bhagavad Gita, it is said that persons who worship demigods have lost their intelligence. Kamnas teste hit jnana. This is 720. They are much attracted to sense gratification, and therefore they worship the demigods. It is of course recommended in the Vedic scriptures that if one wants money, health, or education, they should worship the various demigods. Later he says, this kind of so-called pious and religious man is the result of impersonalism. The impersonalists maintain that the Supreme Absolute has no form, and that one can imagine any form he likes for his benefit and worship in this way. Therefore, the Graham-Hadis of materialistic men say that they can worship any form of a demigod as the worship of Supreme Lord. So this is actually very, very prevalent, especially in India, where when you go and you say somebody to worship Krishna, they say, oh, I'm worshiping Krishna in the form of, and whatever form they are worshiping, Durga or Ganesh, and they say, all gods are the same. So Prabhupada is saying essentially this is impersonalism, because they don't accept that Lord has a personal form, which means that any personal form can be impinged on him. It is up to them. So Prabhupada says the same judgment is confirmed here. So whatever has been said in Bhagavad Gita is now confirmed in the Bhagavatam. And the word kamumudha, meaning that one who has lost his sense or is infatuated by the lust of attraction for sense gratification, is used. Kamumudha. Prabhupada said they are bereft of Krishna consciousness. The worship of demigods is therefore condemned both in Bhagavad Gita and in Srimad Bhagavatam. Next verse 3. Tachshraddhaya krantamatihi Trideva Vrataha Puma Gatva Chandramasam Lokam Somapa Punareshyati. Such materialistic persons, attracted by sense gratification and devoted to the forefathers and demigods, can be elevated to the moon, where they drink an extract of the Soma plant. They again return to this planet. So what's the destination of such people? Lord Kapila says is that people with such faith who are dedicated to the Pitras and the Devas, they go to the moon planet. There they drink Somapa. Somapa is they drink the Som beverage, and eventually Eshati. Eventually they fall down to earth. Same point made in Bhagavad Gita chapter 9. In verse 25, Krishna says, Pitranyanti Pitravarta. That those who have faith in the Pitras go to the planet of the Pitras. And in 920, he says that those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. And Prabhupada in the purport, he says that in spite of being promoted to moon, one has to come back to this earth again when the merits of the work and sacrifice are finished. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 9:21. Tetam bhuktva swarga lokam vishalam kshin punya marti lokam vishanti. Okay, next verse 4. Yada chahindra shayyaya shete ananta shano harihi tada lokalayam yanti tatte graha medinam. All the planets of the materialistic persons, including all the heavenly planets, such as the moon, are vanquished when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, goes to his bed of serpents, which is known as Anantashesh. So what happens in the long run to these people who, by performing pious activities, are going to the heavenly planets? So Lord Kapila is saying that when the Supreme Lord, so who is he referring to over here? Garbhodaksha Vishnu. So when Garbhodaksha Vishnu lies down on Anantashesh at the end of Brahma's day, then there is a partial destruction of the universe. So all the planets up till Maharlok are destroyed. This also includes the planets that are the destination of the pious karmis. So the highest planet that the karmis can go to is Svargalok. They cannot even attain Maharlok. What to speak of Janatapa and Satyalok. So if somehow or the other they have accrued so much pious credit that they are living in Svargalok for a long, long time. What's the example of that? Indra. Because Indra has so much pious credit that he lives in Svargalok for one full Manu. For one full Manvantara, he lives there. But even he has to give it up at the end of Brahma's day when the planet is destroyed. And Prabhupada in the purport says that forget about Svargalok. He says even the Brahmalok gets destroyed. So the Svargalok gets destroyed at the end of Brahma's day, and the Brahmalok gets destroyed at the end of Brahma's life. And Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 8:16, Brahma Bhuvanan Loka Punaravritana Arjuna Mamupetya tu Kaunteya Punajanmana Vidyate. That Brahma Bhuvanan Loka, all the way from the planet of Brahma to the lowest planet system, same thing is going on again and again. Repeated cycle of birth and death. Repeated entry and exit is going on. Verse 5. Ye swadharman dhuyanti Dhira kama tahetave nihasanga niyaskarmanaha prashanta shuddha chetashaha. Those who are intelligent and are of purified consciousness are completely satisfied in Krishna consciousness. Freed from the modes of material nature, they do not act for sense gratification. Rather, since they are situated in their own occupational duties, they act as one is expected to act. So verses 1 and 1 through 4 was Sakam Karma. Now 5 to 7 is Nishkam Karma. So this verse is contrasting the gross materialist with the more intelligent people who do not desire the results of the Artha and Kam. So if they don't desire the results, what do they do with the results? It is said that they offer all the results to the Lord, being free of attachment, and thereby getting a consciousness that is pure and peaceful. So these are the Nishkam Karma practitioners. And Lord Kapila says that they're characterized by 3 attributes. One is Nihasanga, that they do not desire the results of their actions of dharma. 2 is Nadhuyanti, that they are unattached to the activities. The first was the results of the activities. Then the next is the activities. And the third is Niyasta Karmana, that whatever results that accrue from the activities, they offer it to the Lord. So one point to note over here is that the word Nishkam is also context sensitive. Like initially we have discussed so many times that Atma is context sensitive, right? Sometimes we say Atma is the physical body, sometimes we say it's the subtle body, sometimes we say it's the spirit body. So depending on where it is used. Similarly, Nishkam, it is also sensitive to the context in which it is being used. So a Nishkami does not have the desire to enjoy the fruits of his prescribed activity. However, he may still have the desire to perform these prescribed activities. So both are Nishkami. A person who is not attached to the fruits is Nishkami. Person is not attached to the fruits and not attached to the activity is also Nishkami. Now, a Nishkami may have the desire to attain liberation. So, in that context, the person has desires, but is still considered to be a Nishkami because the context is looking at it from the material perspective. Then a devotee is also mentioned as Nishkami because he does not desire the fruits of the activity. He does not desire the activity per se, but also offers the results of the activities to the Lord. So he has no other desire but to please the Lord. Now one might say that is a kam, that is a desire, which is true. So depending on where we draw the boundary, the definition of Nishkam would change. So the reason I'm bringing it up here is because Nishkam is used in verses to mean different things. So it's not a catch-all. So one has to be just sensitive of what is the verse actually trying to say. So the Nishkam Karmi that is described in this verse is further described as Prashanta. So Prashanta means one who is peaceful and satisfied. Prashanta is different from Shanta. So Shanta is Shant, right? Shanta is one who's peaceful under ordinary circumstances. He's in a quiet room and the environment is conducive. He's peaceful. There are some people who can't be peaceful even then. That, you put them in a quiet room, the mind is agitated, they're thinking about everything. But then the Shanta is one that when the environment is conducive, then he's peaceful. The Prashanta is one who's peaceful even if the environment is not conducive. So he may be in an environment that is adverse, but he's still able to maintain his equanimity. So Prabhupada says that persons who work at the prescribed duties, not for sense gratification, but for the gratification of the Supreme Lord, are called Nihasanga, freed from the influence of the modes of material nature. Nyasta Karmana indicates that the results of the activities are given to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such persons appear to be acting on the platform of their respective duties, but such activities are not performed for personal sense gratification. Such devotees are called Prashanta, which means completely satisfied. Shuddha Chetasha means Krishna conscious. The consciousness have become purified. In unpurified consciousness, one thinks of himself as the Lord of the universe. But in a purified consciousness, one thinks himself the eternal servant of the personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada is taking the same verse and using it to describe a devotee. Lord Kapila is not really describing a devotee in this verse. He's describing what can be called as an attached, detached worker. So the person is a Nishkam Karmi. He's still working, but he does not have desire. And Prabhupada does that very often, that he maps it to bhakti, because the only way one can become truly Nishkam is through devotion. So this notion of Nirasanga, Prabhupada said the Nirasanga is only possible by Krishna Sangha. Otherwise, difficult to dissociate with the modes of material nature. Nyasta Karmana, giving up the fruits of your activity, are only possible when you give it to the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, it is difficult. Being Prashanta is only possible when you're in direct connection with the Lord. So Prabhupada explains it from a practical perspective, but Lord Kapila is talking about the philosophy of advancement to different stages. So here essentially he's talking about a Nishkam Karmi. Okay, I'm going to pause over here. Kind of lost track of time, and see if there is any discussion. We have about 5 minutes.
Prabhu, what's the difference between Nishkama Karma and Akama Karma? Is there a difference, or is there some same meaning for both?
It is very similar. Nishkam is Nishkam is the focus on the action, on the doer, that the person is doing without any desires, and Akam is the nature of the activity that he performs, which is activities that do not result in any further reactions. So they sit in the same space.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments?
Just one more thing, Prabhu, about sakama karmis. Are there sakama karma yogis also, or just any karma yogi is called as nishkama karma yogi?
So if we were to get like precise in a terminology, yoga is used when Krishna is there. Otherwise, the Prabhupada says it's not really yoga. So because Krishna is sarvatra, Krishna is everywhere. So anything and everything can be qualified by yoga. Sakam karma yoga, nishkam karma yoga, gyan yoga, bhakti yoga, of course, is there, astang yoga. So the only criteria is that activity is being done to somehow or the else please Krishna. Right at the end of 5th chapter, Krishna gives the definition of karma yogi. Yat karoshi, yat asnashi, yat joshi, tadashi. Right? Whatever you do it as an offering to me. That is karma yoga. Now, from a more from a usage perspective, generally, like we'll say nishkam karma yoga. Even if Krishna is not there, we'll say nishkam karma yoga. But then later on, we will qualify that this is simply working without material desires. And Krishna may or may not be there. So when we study in more precise terminology, then we tend to make this distinction. Whether Krishna is there or not, if Krishna is there, then the term yoga is used. If Krishna is not there, then Sakam Karma Yoga actually becomes, it's called Karma Kanda. Kanda means just following rules and regulations.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are no more comments, we can end over here. Vanchakalpata rubhayaschet kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Thai Gaur Premanande, Hare Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.